never punish their children, but they do discipline their children. There's a great difference between discipline and punishment. The discipline is given with great love. They never use the hand to strike a child or anything. That hand is always for caressing, always for touching and fondling, but never for punishing, never striking the child. But they'll discipline the child by saying, you sit in the hut until the sun goes down or something like that, and it gives some kind of a control. So they have their forms of control. But these are incredible people. First of all, they're tremendous athletes. They got 80-year-old women that run 20 miles a day and stuff like this. It's unbelievable stuff, And these children kick a wooden ball up and down the mountain trails, for 6, 8, 10 hours at a time. And unbelievable things. The BBC sends some psychiatrists over there and serologists and psychologists, and they study these people. They had a 2-hour program on public television on these incredible people. But they have tremendous love capacity. And they just live on deer blood and dried lizard meat. That's their survival. They live on that. And they're very primitive, but exquisitely advanced, way beyond our civilized society, our more civilized society, way beyond that in terms of their psychological development. So we get examples from the animal kingdom and from certain tribes in the human kingdom, human society, in which we see that persons who somehow either socially or otherwise have mastered this idea of love, we see that it has produced powerful effects, such as doing away with all crime, doing away with all addictions, doing away with all conflict. You never get an in-law conflict among those Indians, for instance, or anything like that. You never get fights. No one will fight or argue, none of that. No pinching and never inflicting pain. Any physical hurt to a child would be unthinkable. In our society, child abuse is an incredible thing. 1 out of every 4 girls under 16, 1 out of every 4 girls and 1 out of 8 boys is a victim of incest, sexual abuse by a relative. That's incredible. Some say now it's probably closer to 1 out of 3 girls. If you count rape with incest, 1 out of every 3 women in the United States will be sexually attacked against her will sometime during her life. 1 out of 3 women. Now that's devastating effects on personality, on marriage, on stability, on emotional problems. Many times these women and girls and sometimes boys are so young that they don't know what's happening to them, and they have these devastating submerged memories. And they may not come out until much later, if they come out at all. And the healing of memories for those, that can't remember the memories, the hurts, they've been submerged, they'll have all the symptoms of those submerged memories are bottled up there. They'll cause damage, but they can't get at it to heal it. They don't even think about the need to pray for the healing of it. We want to cover those kind of things, by the way, today in our healing of memories. Okay, now let's look at some of this epigenesis, this developmental process of love. Let me just mention first a very interesting fact about love. Did you know that love can be photographed? You can actually take a picture of love. You've heard of correlate photography, invented in the Soviet Union. Well, they use electrons instead of photons, instead of light, and special instruments. They've done a lot of work with UCLA in the psychology department with this. But anyway, they have something like correlate photography that's been used at the University of Utah, Dr. Gottlieb Stiebel, and he takes a picture of love. Using these correlate photography methods, he sees a person come into a room, like a cocktail party going on, and someone walks into the room and is attracted to a person there of the opposite sex. And there's a man and a woman, and they kind of click. The chemistry goes into effect, as it were, and they find that person very attractive, and they gravitate toward each other. If he takes a picture of the person, either person, but both persons, he notices that there's kind of a glow, a halo around the head of the person. And as the love and intimacy becomes more intense, especially when they're hugging or kissing, the glow becomes much greater as they take pictures of these things. So they call this love. It's the expression. If there is a resentment, a bitterness, or if there is a distancing, or if there's an alienation, or somehow just a non-attraction, you don't get that glow, and they can't photograph it. Of course, it's fascinating. I had some pictures of a leaf that was cut. Part of the leaf was cut off. They threw away a piece of the leaf and took a picture of what was left, and the picture came out with a whole leaf, so that it left a remnant of itself. They do with amputated limbs. They can take a picture of a hand, amputate the hand, and take a picture of the whole arm and hand, and amputate the hand, take another picture after that, and there's the hand on the picture. In other words, the after effect of that's called ergon and a lot of other names they use for it. But that's the basis for this glow. Now they can find that the more that the emotions are there, the more that the love, the positive emotions are there, the more the glow, including the colors, the rainbow colors and so on. If a person is very depressed, they usually get dark purple, deep blue, and sometimes black, the real black aura around there. If the person is happy and full of zest for life and very intense love, then it comes beautiful colors of pink and orange and stuff like that. They use it for psychodiagnostic techniques now, and Dr. Geitley Schneebel at the University of Utah is working on that. But it just shows the reality of love. It shows how the powerful things we're dealing with here. And so when a person is love cheated in life, what a terrible deprivation that is. It's much worse than being half starved for food. When you're love starved, it's like being nutrition starved. You're going to suffer from that. And every one of us is suffering from love starvation to a greater or lesser degree. Some of you may have only minimal love starvation, very little. And some of you may be severely starved for love. Maybe really a big lacuna in your personality, emptiness. So the Lord wants to heal all of us. Let's look to see those areas. Now, think about yourself now as we're talking about these things. And even though you don't know exactly whether they might apply to you, especially in early infancy, consider the possibility they may apply to you. And pray for even possible love deprivation if you think it might be there. At the very moment of conception, there is, of course, full human life. And, of course, that's where God infuses the soul. That's the ensoulment period. This is why abortion at any period of pregnancy is immoral, because it's murder, killing a human being. But that soul, ensoulment of that person there, sets up a whole microcosm of power. Tremendous amounts of energies and powers that are there in that little zygote that the sperm has penetrated the ovum there. And from that point on, the human soul exists and will exist forever, for all eternity. That made to the image and likeness of God. The combination of that with all the 23 pairs of chromosomes, 46 chromosomes altogether, and all the DNA and all the genes and all the components within that, are all has all the characteristics a person can have as an adult. All the potential of a human being is right there. And that can be modified. That can be modified from the very first moment of conception. For instance, they find that if a woman during the second trimester of pregnancy has very severe depression, there's a very great chance she may have a homosexual son if it's a male. It doesn't work with females for that because there's other different types of lesbianism that has different type of genetic factor that may be involved. But the emotion can affect the structure, the molecular structure of the DNA, the genetic structure there, giving a predisposition for certain types of disorders. Now, all through the pregnancy, if you've heard about, for instance, and I'll talk a little later about this when I get this in the rebound, the love bath. In my book on Healing the Family Trees, we talk about this. A pregnant woman puts two hands on either side of her stomach and just holds her hands there, both at the same time, and just imagines with her mind that love is flowing from her mind down through her right arm, through her right hand, to the baby in her womb. Not the left, just the right. And when she does that, the baby moves to the right. And without changing her hands, she just imagines the love flowing down her left arm, and the baby will move to the left. And that baby can pick up, by what is called embryonic telepathy, can pick up the communication of love sent from the mother. When that's done every day in this so-called love bath, the baby becomes accustomed to that, and if it doesn't get its love bath at the same time every day, it gets very restless. It keeps searching around for love. In other words, as you give love, it develops a love hunger, a love need, and it keeps thriving on that, thriving and building on that, and the end result is a very beautiful personality. Some of the interesting studies, Dr. Vernon at the University of Toronto on the secret life of the unborn, the power of love to an unborn child. McNutt has developed this concept also in the prayer bath, where the mother and the father lay hands on the mother's stomach during the pregnancy every day and prays for the baby. Amazing things happen when there's love prayer combined. The personality of that child after birth is incredible compared to those who don't get that love bath. Now, you can see from just from saying things like this, I think you can perceive indirectly that there's enormous sensitivity in a human being. incredible sensitivity for love and consequently love deprivation. Our task here is to find those areas where there has been love deprivation and fill them in. Plug up those holes, those empty spots. Okay? And especially, of course, by the power of Jesus, who is bringing God's love. Abide in my love. We have to really involve ourselves. The word abide, by the way, is abide in my love. It's used 11 times in the New Testament, 10 times by St. John, once by St. Matthew. St. John liked that word abide. The Greek word is meno, from which you get the word remain. Abide means, the word meno means to rest in, or to be immersed in, or to be grafted into, or to be nested into. And so abide in my love means total immersion in the love of God, where you're just surrounded and enveloped and permeated with that love. So as we call upon God's love and we abide in his love, abide in me and I in you. He mentions that in terms of the Eucharist, eats my flesh and drinks my blood, abides in me and I in him, and also the vine and the branch in John 15. I am the vine, you're the branches, abide in me and I in you. Mutual indwelling. When we have that kind of love where we're loving God and God is loving us, we become permeated again as the iron in the fire. Compenetration of the two. When that happens, like the parents giving love to the unborn child, or any child, born or unborn, and the child then feeling that is going to rapidly develop the capacity to give love. Bishop Sheen used to talk about the 6 principles of the psychology of love, and the first one is called the law of reciprocity. Reciprocity is giving and receiving. You reciprocate. It's based upon 1 John 4:16. Why do we love God? Because God has first loved us. We give love only because we receive love. A baby cannot give love if it hasn't first received love. A human being cannot love others if he or she has never been loved himself or herself. So there has to be the input of love before there's the ability to give the output of love. Anyone that does not have enough input of love, and no one has enough, anyone that doesn't have enough input of love cannot have adequate output of love. Each person has a different degree of input of love. You may have had exquisitely loving parents who really just really had the greatest degree of warmth in their love and expressed it to you consistently from infancy all the way through up to adulthood. And you're a very, very privileged person because you have a magnificent personality as a result of that. You have a very, very high chance for a very successful marriage, and your children will probably pick up a lot of that too. This is the intergenerational transmission things we talk about in my book on healing of memories, and then on healing the family tree. A premature baby is interesting to study. I mentioned the cases from the University of Miami and Duke Medical Center about this activity and alertness and so on when they get the stroking and all this. There's another interesting fact about this. Let's start with the human skeleton. There's 206 bones in the human skeleton of an adult. A child has more bones than the adult, but the child's bones fuse together as it grows older. But 206 in adult, both male and female. There's only the basic difference between the male and female skeleton is the pelvic bone. The pelvis of a woman is like a basin to support pregnancy, which is why a woman walks differently than a man. And that rocking motion, as she walks, rocks the baby in the womb. And that rocking motion is a stroking effect that has to do with developing the child's personality. A premature baby doesn't get enough rocking, or a mother has been sick and hospitalized or bedridden during pregnancy, doesn't give that child the rocking motion it needs, then the child's personality will be somewhat truncated. The most advanced nurseries and hospitals now recognize that fact, so the premature babies, knowing they haven't had that rocking, are put into little incubators with oscillating water beds. And these little water beds rock the babies back and forth in a rhythm. I think it's something like 40 times a minute or something. Anyway, the result of that is these babies have a much better appetite, and much better personality, and they're much more integrated. Something like that, the study at the University of Miami and Duke University we talked about, where the children are out of the hospital 6 days sooner because of the stroking and so on. This is a form of stroking, rocking. That's why those old-fashioned pioneer rocking cradles are very, very good. Too bad you don't see them anymore, but they provided a purpose of building a child's personality. Now that's love. The movement, the stroking, the fondling, the touching. That is understood by the child as love. That's the only thing that has comfort. When the child is hungry, it's fed. When the child is cold, it's covered. When it's hot, it's uncovered. When it needs to be moved, it's rocked. The child is like a little animal and gets appreciation by the stroking, the moving. Those are all forms of very primitive forms of love. If those are missing in your development, then there's a big empty spot here that has to or should be filled in. And that's what we're trying to do now by a kind of a miracle process of Jesus intromitting himself into your life and touching that. Now, that's past. How do we get into the past? Well, in God there is no time, because he's like a helicopter pilot looking at a parade. He can see the beginning and end at the same time. Time moving along that way. But in God it's like the end of the hand of a clock that's always equidistant from the central point. It never gets farther away. There's a sempiternal now. In God there's always one now. There's no time sequence in God. There's time sequence in creation that God produces, so there's then and now and future in the creation, but not in God himself. So when God wants to heal, he can go back to our back is not his back, it's present. Not our past is his present. He can move back or move forward and produce things. See, now, how do you heal something that is already past? It no longer exists. The situation no longer exists that caused that deleterious effect. So what God does is to go back to that past situation present in his mind, and he, in our view, was present at that past time, can touch that situation so that the present behavioral patterns that result from it can change. So here we have two ways of looking at it: God's point of view in touching the event of the past, and our view of looking at the thing being affected in the present. Now that's a very profound theological concept from Boethius, who, by the way, devised all this while he was in prison. It's the studying of the nature of time and eternity and aveternity, the three different concepts of time sequence and non-sequence. But we use that now in theology for healing, involving prayer, for instance, how we can pray for things when we don't know whether someone is killed. They may have been killed yesterday. We pray now. Does our prayer now help them to have a happy death yesterday? In God, there's no time sequence, so we can use that. Same thing for healing. We can go back that way into time. The baby in the womb experiences comfort unless it's attacked by things like, if the mother's a smoker, there's 150 poisons in cigarette smoke. The worst ones are nicotine and carbon dioxide that affect the child. In fact, any woman that smokes 1 pack a day can be positively sure that her baby will have the coronary artery will be damaged in that child for life. It may have no major effects until the child's in the 20s, 20 to 28 years old. The child may get a heart attack from or some kind of cardiac deformity from the aorta, which is damaged by the cigarette smoke. Now that child is not comfortable in the womb with that. Same is true with even cough medicine or anything that has alcohol in it. The FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome, is a very common thing. The epicanthic folds in the eyes and all that sort of thing, and especially retardant and slow learning that comes from the child whose mother has taken alcohol during pregnancy. The Bible says that too, and the mother of Samson was told not to drink any wine or any strong drink while she was pregnant with the child that became Samson. God himself says that pregnant women should not take alcohol. Twice that's in the Bible, by the way. If a child has been made uncomfortable by the alcohol, for instance, the child gets a terrible hangover headache when the mother doesn't even feel it after the first cocktail. The child is suffering an agony in the womb. That's very uncomfortable for the child. Not only uncomfortable, but damages the brain and causes slow learning. It cuts down on the memory process, the learning process, and everything else. And it's going to affect the child in the future. The alcohol and nicotine and carbon dioxide and and secondarily the other 150 poisons in cigarette smoke, these do the damage to the child. Now those children do not associate comfort in the womb. They associate discomfort in the womb. So they're pretty damaged already, just from physical damage there. But their feeling of love now is truncated because comfort is love in their mind. They don't have appreciation of love. They have comfort of love. Their idea of love is comfort, being satisfied. So this very early form of love is where we want to start, to prevent the damage and where damage has been done to heal it. Okay? To have the Lord step in and heal that damage. Now, the moment of birth itself, tremendous things happen. This is now, according to this Dr. Le Boyer's famous book, childbirth without fear. Very controversial thing you've seen on the Donahue show and stuff where they have explored all this. It has a lot of obstetricians up in the air because it looks like they're really been negligent. But some of the statistical data that come out from the Labriois childbirth without fear are really clinically established now. Namely, that every baby in normal childbirth, a baby suffers more than the mother does. Not in the same way. The baby suffers more than the mother does in childbirth, usually, because in normal childbirth situation, the baby is hurt by brilliant lights. He's never seen light, and the light hurts his eyes, and he closes his eyes tight, he's squinting, it's in pain. He's never heard sound except the muffled sound of his mother's voice and the sound of the pelvic artery, systolic, diastolic, thump, whoosh, of the heartbeat. That's all he's heard. You can then hear certain kinds of music the child can hear in the womb, by the way, and the mother's voice usually can hear it in a muffled kind of way. So now the child hears the doctors and nurses talking in the delivery room using normal tones of voice, very frightening. Not just the lights blinding the child, but now the sound affecting them, scaring them with a sudden new experience. Then the temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit in the mother's womb, and it drops down to maybe 70 degrees. That sudden drop of maybe 30 degree drop in temperature is a frightening thing for a child. And then the skin of a neophyte, newborn, is the most comfortable blanket, feels like sandpaper to that child. And then, all these things, the child is traumatized right at the outset with the temperature, with the sound, with the light, with all of these things, and the handling, and they're sticking all the syringes down the throat and all this stuff. And there's really a lot of damage that takes place, and that's called the birth trauma. Dr. Laboyer says, now we can prove that if you turn down the lights, turn up the heat to equate the mother's womb temperature roughly, tell the doctors and nurses to speak in whispers softly, to accommodate the child to sound and so on, and minimize the trauma in every way possible, then the child, in every case, will smile within the first 3 minutes of life. If you didn't smile in the first 3 minutes of your life, then you've been damaged. And I guess that's all of us, because they didn't know this stuff. I know, when I was born 68 years ago, they didn't know that. So I know I was damaged. Anyway, so we have to, that's one of the places we have to work. See, the before birth healing back things that are damaged before birth, including the mentality of the parents. I'll show you some very interesting statistics about stormy marriages during pregnancy, how that affects the baby. The baby in the womb can really be damaged by an argument between mother and father, even though the child can't hear that argument. Tremendous damage can come, and that's provable by the amount that the child will cry after birth. Is 237% more crying after birth in cases the overall average is 237% of crying by children who had a stormy marriage in their parents before birth. So the child now is conditioned to receive love, and he can't give love unless they receive it, but the love is very primitive. It's comfort and security and not hurtful experiences of the senses and all that sort of thing. Now, birth trauma, then, is where we emphasize that. Now, from this point on, we go through certain episodes in love development, the epigenesis, some of which are critical, some of which are hypercritical. A hypercritical period is the first 72 hours of life. If a child gets no love for the first 72 hours of life, is never touched, and this is danger with preemies especially, but if the child is never touched, never fondled at all for the first 72 hours of life, and is not given love, some of which he can intuit telepathically, the child is very sensitive for certain emotions, especially love and anger, attraction and rejection. The child can pick that up by this basic embryonic telepathy that Dr. Vernon has pointed out at the University of Toronto. This child, for the first 72 hours of life, it never gets any love, has an 85% chance of becoming a sociopath, a criminal. It develops aggression. It becomes, a scribbler of graffiti, a destruction of property, and thinks nothing of other people, throwing candy wrappers in the ground, totally careless of other people's property and the order in life. They just, and then they go into deeper things like aggression and real criminality. stealing and cheating in school and things like that. It goes deeper and deeper. They've been conditioned in the first 72 hours of life. The amount of love that comes there at that time is hypercritical. Some of the other periods are critical, so you're going to find some critical, some hypercritical periods for the love input. The experiments of Dr. Spitz in the turn of the century in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia, they were replicated again in Bolivia and also University of Moscow Medical School, and resulted in the death of thousands of children to prove this fact. But he took hundreds of children here in Pittsburgh, put them from foundling homes, newborns, and divided them in two groups, in two different foundling homes or hospitals. They had foundling homes in those days. And they they gave them exactly the same nourishment, same food, same vitamins, everything was the same. Same mattresses, same beds, everything was the same in both of these foundling homes, except for one point. The nurses in one were told to cuddle these babies, smile, look into their eyes, call their name, pet them, fondle them, love them, hug them, pick them up when they cried, and so on. The other ones, they just fed them like animals in a cage. They would feed them, and that's it. So they got the same nourishment. But after 2 years, what a difference. The ones that were given all the love and were trained with the TLC, tender loving care, the ones that were given that, every one of those children was happy and healthy after 2 years. But in the other ones, there was a 95% death mortality rate, and those few that lived after the 2 years, the small percentage that lived, were either idiots, imbeciles, or morons. That is, they had reduced intelligence. Their IQ was damaged by their emotional deprivation. They were not deprived physically of any food, just deprived of the nourishment of love. Now we know that love deprivation can cause a lowering of the phosphorus and potassium in the bloodstream of a child. That love is a nutrient, or at least a catalyst for a nutrient. So it's critical for good, healthy living to have love. And a child that doesn't get an enormous amount of love is going to be fixated and going to be obtunded in his health development. Okay, now they did this. They couldn't believe what happened there in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, so they tried it down in Bolivia. Same thing happened down there with thousands of children dying from love deprivation, and in the University of Moscow, the same thing again. They finally agreed that love is a nutrient, or at least a catalyst for nutrient. Comparing that with the Tarahumari Indian situation, you see exactly how that what is shown in nature is replicable in science. Now the next period, the hypercritical period, is from the 6th month to 18th month period. It's actually the first 2 years, but especially 6th to 18th month. That's the time you don't want to have too many babysitters or grandparents taking over too much from the parents and so on. Well, that child has to relate to the mother and father in a very special way with close intimacy, mother and father. And I'll tell you a little bit later about how to prevent fornication in teenagers by that one component there. That person has to have the mother and father love, especially from the 6th to the 18th month, expressed love. It's very important to have masculine love as well as feminine love. So a father who never carries or holds a child or plays with a child, never bathes the child or feeds the child or anything, a father that says that's the mother's task, let her take care of the baby, I don't take care of the babies. And the father that deprives that child of masculine love is going to cause great damage, both for babies, male and female. Babies can do great damage. One of the most damnable inventions are these plastic boxes they carry babies in. The baby needs to be held. And now it's okay to use the plastic boxes for babies for car safety and things like that to strap them in, but to go shopping with a baby in a plastic box is crazy. That child does not feel loved. That child does not have any input of love. And it can cause damage if there's a great deal of that going on. It's so important to get this sense of intimacy. Physical intimacy is the only language the child understands that equates itself to love in that primitive form. This is love in a primitive form. Comfort is all it is. Comfort. But the comfort, especially this tactile and kinesthetic relationships where there's a touching, feeling, moving, fondling. That's critically important for animals and for children. It's also important in a lesser degree, but all through life, where there should be that kind of, for instance, arm around the shoulder or something. Friendship is, it does something. It lowers the blood pressure, for one thing. Did you ever see a study on hugs? On what they've discovered about hugs? My gosh, they got lists, the things they've discovered, unbelievable, about how you can lower the cholesterol by hugging someone and receiving a hug. And yeah, unbelievable. And the blood pressure can be lowered. Same is true in petting animals, what they discovered in these old folks' homes where a person is uncommunicative. They give them a cat or a dog, put it in their lap, and they start to communicate. They've never done before. They can break them out of schizoid personality things by just pets. And when they pet a dog or an animal or something, they not only lower their own blood pressure in doing that, but they also lower the blood pressure of the animal too. Anyway, now every woman has a maternal instinct, and some have better maternal instincts than others. But a woman that has a very well-developed maternal instinct will always usually hold the baby on the left side, not the right side. The woman's heart is in the center of the body, but the heartbeat is detectable more on the left side because of the structure of the heart. And so she doesn't know why she does this, but she will normally, instinctively hold the child on the left. Why? Why does that child need the heartbeat? Because the child has to replicate the experience from within the womb. Please. The child wants to experience what he's experienced in the womb, and that is the pelvic arterial pulse, which is the heartbeat. That the child's only thing is experienced essentially in the womb. So when the child gets that out of the womb, the extrauterine experience, it replicates the comfort. So the child thinks of this. That's why the Japanese invented that thing called the somatone, which they put in these hospital nurseries, which is nothing else but a tape recording of a woman's heartbeat.